Hello, this is Gio. Hey, look what we have here. We have my Xbox, my original Xbox again, and we're here to fix another issue, and this time it has to do with the internal clock of the unit. So let's go ahead and turn it on, boot it up to show you what's happening. And there you go, it boots right into the clock setting. So it wants me to set the clock. So okay, well, we'll just go ahead and randomly select some things to change here. I changed the 8 o'clock there, that should be good. So we'll accept that. And now it's in the main menu. And now we're gonna go ahead and turn it off again. And we're actually gonna unplug the power. Now, once the power is unplugged, it should remember that time for up to about 6 hours. So let's go ahead and plug it back in. Get it back in there like that. Okay, and turn it back on. So if that clock is still remembering the time, it shouldn't give me that setup window again. We'll see what happens. And there you go, it's asking for the time again, and clearly it's 12 o'clock, not 8 o'clock, and so it is not remembering the time. So this is a common problem in old Xboxes. There's actually a clock capacitor in most old Xboxes that easily goes bad and actually could ruin your Xbox if you don't change it. And the fact that it's already seems like it's not working, I'm a little concerned that it may have leaked a little bit and maybe affected the board a little bit. So we do want to get that thing out and replaced. Now, you don't have to necessarily replace the capacitor, you can just remove it. You'll always get this setup clock when you boot up, but we're going to replace this today, and I'll show you how to do that. But first, I kind of want to show you something in the setup menu to kind of identify which Xbox you have. Now, that clock capacitor is present in most Xboxes except for the very last one. So if you go into your settings here, which you just go down to the bottom here, select that, and then go all the way down to system info, you'll start getting a scroll, and what you're looking for is a kernel number. And there you go, it's that K number right there, and right there it's showing me as K number, but it's the 5101 that I'm interested in. And if you look at this table right here, you can see that the 5101 is for Xbox versions between 1.2 and 1.5, and actually anything that's before the version 1.6 or 1.6b in this actually has that clock capacitor in it, and it can go bad. So if you do have that 1.6 version, you don't have to do this modification or change the capacitor, or you don't even have to worry about it. But if you're an earlier version, then I recommend that you at least either remove this capacitor or change it before it goes bad. Okay, so in order to replace or remove your clock capacitor, you will need to get to the motherboard of your console, and so you'll need to open up your machine and remove the hard drive, disk drive, etc., a bunch of cables. And so I'm not going to show you how to disassemble your Xbox here. I do have an earlier video, which I will show a link at the very end of this video. And so if you're interested in how to open up your Xbox and reassemble it, that video will show you how to get to the point where I will start in this video here. So if you watched that previous video, we pretty much got to this point before we started reassembling the unit. And so we have the motherboard on this side, the power board on this side, and basically it looks like how we left it off before we reassembled. Now I do want to focus on down here because this is where the clock capacitor is. And so just kind of zooming in right here, you'll notice this capacitor right here, which is right next to a big capacitor, this right here is the clock capacitor. Now this configuration may be a little bit different in your unit. Basically, you might have several large capacitors on this side. Your clock capacitor might be a gold color, but essentially the smaller one next to the large one here is the clock capacitor, and it should be a 1 farad 2.5 volt capacitor. So looking at a different angle, you can definitely see that this capacitor has some issues. You see some white powder at the base, and that suggests that yes, indeed, this capacitor leaked onto the board. You see some powder over here, some discoloration, and so there actually might be some board damage in addition to just needing to replace this capacitor. We won't really know that until after we get this thing out and cleaned up. So again, you do not need this capacitor to actually run your Xbox. It's just that clock and date function when you first boot it up. And if you don't care about that, you can just simply remove this capacitor without even removing the motherboard. You can take some really thin snips and snip the legs underneath this. Some people just kind of wiggle this back and forth until those legs break. You just want to be careful about that. But since we have a lot of already some leakage here and some potential board damage, and there could be some damage on the other side of this board, we definitely want to remove this motherboard just to at least examine everything. Plus, I do want to replace this capacitor at the end, so you will need to remove the board for that, and that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is remove some cables to expose the board. Now here's the ribbon cable to the disk drive and hard drive. We could just kind of lift this out just by wiggling it just like that. Put that aside. And then the power cable. Now we don't necessarily have to remove this. You can or can't. I think I'll just leave that in place since it's kind of out of the way. You then want to remove the motherboard power cable, which is right here. It has a little kind of a little push button thing to kind of release it. So you just push that down. Doing this with one hand. Let's do it with two hands. And then you need to remove a couple of controller port cables here, depending on your version of Xbox. Once you remove those, it actually may remove a controller a little board as well. So we'll do that next. And lastly, there should be a little cable here connected to the fan. So we'll just kind of wiggle that out, just like that. Okay, so next to remove the motherboard itself. Now, I believe that there is 11 screws that you have to remove. They are the Torx size 10, T10 size screws. So you'll need that little bit. It looks like a little star bit. I'm not sure if you can see that there. That's the torque bit. And let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then there's 2 on these plugs. So 10, 11. So 11 screws altogether that we need to remove. And with that, the motherboard should be able to just kind of wiggle out. Let's see. There you go. There you go. That's the motherboard. Okay, so now that we have the motherboard out, we could kind of examine it a little bit better. Clearly, we saw the powder that was on this side, but looking at the back, Here, let me zoom in right here. This is generally where that capacitor is, right over here. I don't really see any damage on this side, so that's a good thing. So if there's any corrosion or trace issues, it wouldn't be on this back side. So that's at least good. So let me just take a swab and some isopropyl alcohol and kind of clean this up and see if I can see any damage underneath this powder. Okay, so cleaning it up a little bit, it does look like there's some kind of corrosion. I'm not sure if you can see this here on some of those contacts, but we won't really know until we get this capacitor out of there. And so that's what we will do next. Okay, so there's a couple ways you can try to remove this. Now, if you look at, this is a polarized capacitor. It should have a negative end, and the negative end is on this side. So that's the negative, this is the positive. And so the two legs are kind of like in this line here. Some people like to just wiggle this back and forth. You don't want to do it in the same direction as the legs. You want to do it kind of the perpendicular to the legs and kind of rock it back and forth until the legs eventually break. Now, this does not have a lot of leeway. I don't see any kind of space there, so it won't really rock that easily. That also currently prevents me from using my little snips. I kind of prefer, if you have a little height to the capacitor, just snip off the legs on each side and remove it that way. If you could get the capacitor off first, then getting the legs desoldered is easier and safer, because anytime you pull a part like that, like if you desolder the back and pull this up, any trace that's underneath there could actually be pulled up with it. So you have to be really careful. Unfortunately, I don't want to really do the rocking method just because it's so flush to the ground and I can't snip it. So I will have to desolder it from the back side. And so taking a look, it appears to be these two legs right here. So these are the two legs. This one and that one. The negative is this. And I've already checked continuity, and those seem to be connected to those two pads right there. So that's probably connected on the back side. But if I break that trace, I might be able just to kind of bridge these two right there. But so let's try to desolder this. First, I just want to put a little resin on the situation. And then I do want to add a little bit of fresh solder. This will just make the job that much easier to desolder. And then holding on to the back side, now I'm going to desolder the negative side first, and I'm going to heat it up really well, and then just kind of like push the capacitor this way to try to loosen that leg and try to get that out. Now I'm doing this gently, and there, it kind of pushed away. Now I'm going to do the opposite side. I'm going to push this way and desolder the positive side like that, and I'm just going to kind of rock it back and forth just like that. Before I take the whole thing out, I'm going to examine what we have here, and now you can kind of see that it's kind of standing up higher like that, so it looks okay so far. So I'll just continue to remove the whole thing. I'm actually going to just snip these things off a little bit. Okay, I think I got the legs out of there, and so add a little more flux and use some braid here to clean everything up. Okay, so I think I got the holes cleaned up. Now, a little technique, if you're having trouble cleaning out the solder that's in the holes and you can't really gain access to those holes, a little trick I've learned is take another component, like another like the capacitor right here, and actually heat up and kind of stick one of the legs up on top and heat that leg until it goes through. And then kind of keep on going up and down until that hole is cleared out. Do that the same on the other hole. You might have to go from the opposite side depending on where the solder is, but doing that technique sometimes cleans out these little tiny holes, which can be sometimes difficult to get solder out. So the capacitor I did take out is a 1 farad. You can barely see that on that side, but 1.5 or 2.5 volt 1 farad capacitor, supercapacitor. I got a replacement from console5.com. Now this is 1 farad, but it is a 2.7 volt capacitor. Now it's okay to put in higher voltage capacitors, just don't go under the voltage that's specified for the board. So 2.5 replacing with the 2.7 is just fine as long as the farads match. Now this is a supercapacitor. I did get it from Console 5, but you can order these, from Amazon or what have you. But these basically are specifically designed for long-term discharge. Again, you could unplug your Xbox and this capacitor will essentially keep that clock charged for about 6 hours or so. It's not a classic battery, but it will keep it charged just in case you have a power outage. So I'm a bit concerned about some of the damage that occurred. There is some a little corrosion on some of these contacts for some of these components. I'm going to just try to clean those off as best I can and do some continuity testing, making sure all these traces work. I'm not going to test these components themselves, but as long as the traces work, I should be okay, and then I'll replace the capacitor. Okay, so I cleaned things out as best I can and kind of scraped off some of the connectors to a lot of these components and cleaned things off. And it looks like all the traces are okay. There are 2 traces that do look like they degraded. Kind of on either side of where the capacitor was, as you can see here. There's one on the right over here. And then there's another one on the left that look like they're totally gone. But when I turn over the board and check the other side, it does not look like those actually go anywhere. They just kind of dead end. So hopefully I don't have to deal with those. I'm also concerned about this capacitor right here. As you can see, there's a fair amount of kind of powder degradation right here. There's some corrosion right underneath this capacitor. So I'm not sure if this capacitor is good or not. This is a 22 microfarad capacitor. I believe 25 volts. I think I have a 50 volt I could replace this with. So I think I'll take this capacitor out, look underneath here for damage, and move on from there. Okay, so I took that capacitor out. It does look like there's a pad that's pretty degraded right there. Just looking at continuity, the lower one's okay. And the upper one, I'm still getting some continuity there. It's connected, but I think I'll add a little solder to this little pad here just to kind of help it out a little bit. And so you can see here I did replace that one capacitor. So now with that cleanup work done, hopefully there's no permanent damage, but I will replace the clock capacitor here. And it is polarized, so remember the negative end was this way. And so we want to put it in the holes, the correct direction. Like that. And I like to, I don't like to keep them flush. As you can see with this one, I have it a little bit above the board. It just allows, you don't need it flush. And then I'm gonna kind of bend back the legs a little bit. As you can see here, to kind of hold it into place. And then I will go ahead and solder them in. You want to make sure you heat up the wire first and then apply the solder. Heat up the wire
and apply the solder. And then snip them off.
And there you go. The new capacitor is in.
Now all I have to do is reverse the process. So we'll take our board, very gently kind of put it in place there. Make sure all the wires are out of the way here. There we go. I think it's fit. And then go ahead and start putting back all the screws. And with all the screws in, just go ahead and plug back in the fan. If you remove this power cable, you'll need to replace that. So we'll go ahead and replace this ribbon cable. Let's see, the control cables here. I need smaller fingers. Here, and then the board power cable here. And I believe that is it. And now all you have to do is go to my previous video to figure out how to reassemble from this point on, and then go ahead and test your unit out. All right, let's test her out. Now I already turned it on and actually reset the time. It has been unplugged, so let's go ahead and plug it back in. There we go. We'll turn it on, and hopefully it will pop up without showing that clock reset. And there you go, it goes right to the main menu. So if we go down to, I believe, settings, and then clock, it shows the clock time is 8:08, so it's not 12 o'clock. So it's remembering the time now. So our replacement worked. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like button at the bottom of the screen, and even consider subscribing to my channel. I have many more videos to come. Bye-bye.